The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, revealing a world most people only see in movies. The penthouse stretched out like a palace in the sky, with floor-to-ceiling windows showing all of New York City below. Everything sparkled, from the marble floors to the crystal chandeliers hanging overhead. But despite all this beauty, the house felt cold and quiet. David Chen walked through his home with heavy steps. His expensive shoes clicked against the marble as he made his way to the living room. He was worth billions, had built a tech empire from nothing, and owned properties around the world. Yet none of that mattered when he looked at the two small wheelchairs sitting by the window. His 4-year-old twins, Lily and Lucas, sat quietly looking out at the city. They should have been running around, climbing on furniture, making noise like other kids their age. Instead, they spent their days in those chairs, their little legs unable to carry them. David's wife, Catherine, was on the phone with another doctor. She had a notebook filled with names and numbers, specialists from around the world who promised they could help. Her voice was tired as she spoke, asking the same questions she'd asked dozens of times before. "Are you sure there's nothing else we can try?" Money is not a problem. It never was a problem for them. They had already spent millions trying to help their children. The best doctors, the newest treatments, experimental medicines that cost more than most people's houses. Nothing worked. The twins had been born with a rare condition that affected their muscles. The doctors used big medical words that basically meant one thing: their children might never walk. David remembered the day they got the diagnosis. He had been in a meeting when Catherine called, crying so hard he could barely understand her words. He left everything and rushed to the hospital, sure that money could fix whatever was wrong. That was 2 years ago. Since then, they had traveled to every major medical center, consulted with experts who charged thousands just to look at test results. The house was full of medical equipment now. Physical therapy mats, special chairs, machines that were supposed to help with muscle development. The playroom looked more like a small hospital than a place for children to have fun. Nurses came and went, following strict schedules and treatment plans that filled up calendars but brought no real change. Catherine finished her call and walked over to where David stood. Her eyes were red, and he could tell she had been crying again. "Dr. Williams says there's a new treatment in Switzerland," she said quietly, not wanting the children to hear. "It's experimental, but some patients have shown improvement." David nodded, though inside he felt empty. How many times had they heard those same words? How many false hopes had they chased across continents? "How much?" he asked, because that's what he always asked. $2 million for the full program, Catherine answered, plus living expenses for 6 months. $2 million was nothing to them. David made that much in a few hours when his company's stock went up, but money felt useless when it couldn't buy the one thing they desperately wanted: to see their children take their first steps. The twins had turned back to their coloring books. Lily was carefully staying inside the lines of a picture of a butterfly. Lucas was drawing what looked like a race car, adding extra wheels because, as he always said, more wheels make it go faster. They seemed happy enough, but David could see the sadness in their eyes when they watched other children playing in the park below. Last week, they had tried to take the family to Central Park. It should have been a simple outing, parents pushing their kids on swings, maybe having a picnic. Instead, it became another reminder of what they couldn't do. While other children ran around, Lily and Lucas sat in their wheelchairs watching. When a ball rolled near them, Lucas tried to get up to kick it back. The look of frustration on his face when he couldn't broke David's heart all over again. Catherine spent most of her time researching new treatments online. Her laptop was always open, filled with medical websites and parent forums where people shared stories of hope and disappointment. She had joined support groups and called families who had children with similar conditions. Some days she came back from these conversations excited about a new possibility. Other days she locked herself in the bedroom and cried. David dealt with his pain differently. He worked longer hours, stayed later at the office, took more business trips. It was easier than being home and feeling helpless. He could solve complex business problems, negotiate multi-billion-dollar deals, but he couldn't fix the most important thing in his life. The household staff tried their best to help. There was a full-time nurse, Mrs. Rodriguez, who was kind and professional. She followed all the doctor's instructions perfectly, made sure the children took their medicines on time, and kept detailed records of every therapy session. But she was clinical, efficient, more like a medical professional than someone who really connected with the kids. They had also hired several babysitters over the months, but none of them lasted long. Some were overwhelmed by the medical needs. Others treated the children differently because of their condition, speaking to them in that overly sweet voice people use when they feel sorry for someone. The twins could sense it, and they never warmed up to these caregivers. The house that should have been filled with laughter and the sound of running feet was instead quiet and sterile. Conversations were whispered, as if speaking too loudly might make things worse. The twins had learned to be careful, to move slowly, to ask for help with everything. They were losing the natural boldness that 4-year-olds should have. Friends and family tried to be supportive, but their visits often made things worse. People would look at the children with pity, speak in hushed tones, and tell David and Catherine to stay strong and never give up hope. But hope was becoming harder to hold onto with each failed treatment. David's business partner had suggested they hire a live-in housekeeper to help manage the household while they focused on medical treatments. "You need someone reliable," he had said. "Someone who can handle the daily stuff so you can concentrate on finding a cure." The employment agency had sent several candidates, but none felt right. Some were too expensive, others didn't have experience with special needs children. A few seemed more interested in the wealthy lifestyle than actually helping the family. Then last week the agency called about one more person. Her name was Rosa, and she was from Guatemala. Her English wasn't perfect and she didn't have formal training in childcare, but something in her voice during the phone interview made Catherine curious. "She raised 5 children of her own," the agency representative explained, "and she has letters of recommendation from families she's worked with. They all say the same thing. She has a gift with children." David wasn't sure about hiring someone without medical training. What they needed was professional help, not someone who would just clean and cook. But Catherine was tired of professional clinical care that kept their children alive, but didn't make them happy. Rosa was scheduled to start Monday morning. As David looked at his children still coloring quietly by the window, he wondered if bringing another stranger into their home would make any difference. He had stopped believing in miracles long ago. All he wanted now was to see his children smile the way they used to, before the wheelchairs became part of their world. Monday morning came with gray clouds hanging over the city. David was drinking his coffee and reading emails when the doorbell rang. He checked his watch, exactly 8 o'clock. At least she was punctual. Catherine answered the door and returned with a woman who looked to be in her mid-40s. Rosa was shorter than David had expected, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a small suitcase that looked like it had traveled many miles. "Good morning, Mr. Chen," Rosa said with a warm smile. Her accent was thick, but her words were clear. "Thank you for giving me this chance." David nodded politely, but inside he was already having doubts. This woman looked nothing like the professional caregivers they were used to. She seemed too simple, too ordinary for their complicated situation. Rosa's first meeting with the twins was in the living room. Lily and Lucas were having breakfast, sitting in their wheelchairs at the special table that had been adjusted to their height. Mrs. Rodriguez, the nurse, was feeding them while explaining their medication schedule to Rosa. But Rosa wasn't paying attention to the medical talk. Instead, she walked directly to the children and knelt down so she was at their eye level. "Hola, beautiful children," she said softly. "My name is Rosa. I'm here to be your friend." Lily looked up from her cereal bowl, curious about this new person who spoke differently than everyone else. Lucas stared at Rosa with the cautious expression he had developed around new adults. "You have very pretty hair," Rosa told Lily, gently touching one of her curls. "It shines like gold in the sunlight." Then she turned to Lucas. "And you have the strongest hands I have ever seen. I bet you can squeeze very tight." Lucas, who loved any mention of being strong, immediately grabbed Rosa's finger to show her his grip. She pretended to struggle and made exaggerated sounds of surprise. "Oh my, you are like a superhero!" This made both children giggle, a sound that had become rare in the house. Mrs. Rodriguez continued explaining the medical routine, but Rosa was more interested in learning about the children's personalities. "What do you like to play?" she asked Lily. "I like to color," Lily said shyly, "and I like stories about princesses." "Princesses are very important," Rosa agreed seriously. "I know many stories about brave princesses from my country. Would you like to hear them sometime?" Lily nodded eagerly, and David found himself surprised by how quickly Rosa had captured his daughter's attention. Over the next few days, David watched Rosa settle into their routine. She was different from any caregiver they had hired before. While Mrs. Rodriguez focused on medical schedules and therapy appointments, Rosa seemed more interested in making the children happy. She didn't follow the strict meal plans that had been carefully designed by nutritionists. Instead, she started cooking foods from her homeland, rich soups filled with vegetables and herbs that made the whole house smell amazing. When Catherine questioned her about this, Rosa explained simply, "Children need food that makes their hearts happy, not just their bodies healthy." The twins loved Rosa's cooking. For the first time in months, they finished their meals without being reminded to eat. Lucas even asked for seconds of her special soup, something he never did with the bland, healthy meals they usually had. But it was Rosa's approach to their condition that really set her apart. Everyone else in the house spoke about the twins' disability in whispered tones, using medical terms and treating them like fragile glass that might break. Rosa talked to them like they were normal children who just happened to need wheelchairs right now. "Tomorrow we will dance," she announced on her third day. As she was giving them lunch, Mrs. Rodriguez looked confused. "Mrs. Rosa, the children cannot dance. Their physical therapy is very specific and dancing is not part of their treatment plan." Rosa smiled and continued serving the soup. "Everyone can dance," she said simply. "Dancing is not just with the feet. We can dance with our hands, our shoulders, our hearts. Music makes the soul move even when the legs cannot." That afternoon, while Catherine was at another doctor's appointment and David was in his office on a conference call, Rosa brought a small radio into the living room. She found a station playing Latin music and turned up the volume. "Now we dance," she announced to the confused children. Rosa began moving to the rhythm, swaying her hips and moving her arms gracefully. The twins watched, fascinated. Then she wheeled their chairs closer and took their hands. "Feel the music," she said, moving their arms gently with the beat. At first, Lily and Lucas were stiff and uncertain, but Rosa's enthusiasm was infectious. She sang along with the music in Spanish, making funny faces and exaggerated movements that made the children laugh. Soon both twins were moving their arms and upper bodies to the rhythm. David heard the music and laughter from his office. When he looked out, he saw something that made him stop his phone call mid-sentence. His children were smiling, really smiling, for the first time in weeks. Lucas was waving his arms dramatically, trying to copy Rosa's movements. Lily was giggling as Rosa spun her wheelchair in gentle circles to the beat. But Rosa's methods extended beyond just making the children happy. David started noticing that she spent time each day massaging their legs and feet. She used warm towels and oils that smelled like herbs, working her hands gently over their small limbs. When he asked her about it, Rosa explained that her grandmother had taught her these techniques back in Guatemala. "In my village," she said, "we believe that touch can heal, not like medicine, but like love. When we show the body that we care for it, sometimes it remembers how to be strong." The medical team was skeptical. Mrs. Rodriguez reported Rosa's unconventional methods to Catherine, suggesting they might interfere with the prescribed treatments. But Catherine, desperate for anything that made her children happy, decided to let Rosa continue as long as she didn't stop the official medical care. Rosa also changed how the family talked about the future. While everyone else focused on the children's limitations, Rosa spoke constantly about all the things they would do together. She described trips to the park where they would feed ducks, visits to the zoo to see elephants, and adventures in the city where they would explore new places. "When will we do these things?" Lucas asked one day. "Soon," Rosa answered with complete confidence. "Very soon. I can feel it in my heart." David overheard this conversation and felt a mix of frustration and concern. He didn't want Rosa filling his children's heads with false hope. They had been disappointed too many times already. But as the days passed, he noticed changes in the twins that went beyond just their mood. They seemed more alert during their physical therapy sessions. They participated more actively in their exercises, asking questions and trying harder than before. Their appetite improved and they slept better at night. Most surprisingly, they started asking to spend time on the floor instead of always staying in their wheelchairs. Rosa would spread soft blankets in the living room and encourage them to lie down while she massaged their legs or played gentle games with them. "The floor is not scary," she would tell them. "The floor is where we practice being close to the earth. The earth gives us strength." David didn't understand Rosa's philosophy, but he couldn't argue with the results. His children seemed more alive than they had in months. They laughed more, asked more questions, and showed interest in the world around them again. Catherine noticed the changes too. "They seem different," she told David one evening as they watched Rosa reading the twins a bedtime story. "Happier, but also stronger somehow." David nodded, though he was still cautious about getting his hopes up. They had been disappointed so many times before. But as he listened to his children's laughter echoing through the house that had been silent for so long, he found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, this simple woman from Guatemala might have something that all their expensive doctors had missed. 3 weeks had passed since Rosa joined the family, and the house felt different. The twins woke up excited each morning, eager to see what adventures Rosa had planned for them. But David was about to witness something that would change everything he believed about hope and healing. It started on a Tuesday morning when Rosa was giving Lily her daily massage. David was walking past the living room when he heard his daughter make a sound he hadn't heard in months, a genuine laugh of surprise and delight. "Papa." "Papa, look," Lily called out excitedly. David rushed into the room to see Lily pointing at her foot. It moved. "My toe moved when Rosa touched it." David's heart skipped a beat, but he forced himself to stay calm. The doctors had told them that muscle spasms were common and didn't necessarily mean anything significant. He didn't want to get anyone's hopes up over what might be nothing, but Rosa's face lit up like she had just witnessed a miracle. "I knew it," she exclaimed, gently holding Lily's small foot. "I could feel the life in your muscles yesterday. They are waking up, little princess." Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been organizing medical supplies nearby, came over to examine Lily's foot. She moved it gently, checking for reflexes. "It could be an involuntary muscle movement," she said professionally. "We should note it in her medical chart, but we shouldn't read too much into it." But Rosa ignored the medical caution. She began massaging Lily's foot with renewed enthusiasm, talking to it like it was a dear friend. "Hello, little foot," she said in her musical voice. "I have been waiting for you to wake up. Are you ready to start learning how to dance?" Over the next few days, Rosa increased her focus on the children's legs and feet. She spent longer periods massaging them, using different oils and techniques her grandmother had taught her. She also started incorporating new games that encouraged the twins to try moving their lower bodies. "Today we play airplane," she announced one morning, helping Lucas lie on his back on the soft mat she had spread on the floor. "Your legs are the airplane wings. Let's see if we can make them fly." She gently lifted Lucas's legs and moved them in slow flying motions. At first his legs were completely limp, but Rosa persisted with patience and enthusiasm. "Come on, little airplane," she cooed. "Show me how strong your wings can be." Lucas concentrated hard, his face serious with effort. And then, for just a moment, David saw his son's leg muscle tense slightly, as if he was trying to help with the movement. "Did you see that?" Rosa asked excitedly. "Lucas is helping. His airplane wants to fly." David wanted to believe what he was seeing, but years of disappointment had made him careful about hope. Still, he found himself paying closer attention to Rosa's daily sessions with the children. Rosa had also started making small changes to their environment. She moved furniture around to create clear pathways and placed colorful tape on the floor in interesting patterns. When Catherine asked about it, Rosa explained that she was preparing the runway for when they are ready to travel. The twins loved the new floor decorations and asked to spend more time out of their wheelchairs, lying on mats and cushions that Rosa arranged near the colorful tape paths. She told them stories about the tape being magic roads that led to amazing adventures. "This yellow line goes to the kingdom where all the butterflies live," she would say, tracing the tape with her finger. "And this red one leads to the mountain where the strongest eagles fly. Someday, you will follow these roads and see all these wonderful places." Mrs. Rodriguez continued to document everything in her medical reports, but she remained skeptical. "The children are certainly happier," she told Catherine. "But we shouldn't confuse emotional improvement with physical healing. Their condition is permanent and we need to be realistic about expectations." But Rosa never wavered in her certainty that the children would walk again. She spoke about it so naturally, so confidently, that even David found himself wanting to believe her. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Rosa was in the kitchen preparing her special soup when she heard a crash from the living room, followed by Lucas crying. She rushed in to find him on the floor next to his overturned wheelchair. "What happened, my brave boy?" Rosa asked, kneeling beside him. Through his tears, Lucas explained that he had been trying to reach a toy that had fallen behind his chair. "I wanted to get it myself," he sobbed, "but I fell down." Instead of scolding him for being unsafe or immediately putting him back in his wheelchair, Rosa helped him sit up on the floor mat. "You wanted to get your toy by yourself?" she asked. "That is very brave. Show me what you were trying to do." Lucas pointed to the toy truck that was about 3 feet away. It might as well have been 3 miles for a child who couldn't walk. "Let's practice being brave together," Rosa said. She positioned herself behind Lucas, supporting his back with her body. "Put your hands on the floor and let's see if we can move toward your truck." What happened next made David's breath catch in his throat. He had been walking by the room when he heard Rosa's encouraging voice and decided to peek in. He saw Lucas, with Rosa's support, actually moving his body forward on the floor. It wasn't walking, but it was intentional movement using his own strength. "I'm doing it," Lucas exclaimed, his face bright with pride. "I'm moving by myself." Rosa cheered as if Lucas had just won an Olympic medal. "You are so strong. Look how far you have traveled already." It took Lucas several minutes to cover those 3 feet, but when he finally reached his toy truck, the joy on his face was indescribable. He held it up triumphantly, and Rosa clapped and cheered like she was watching the most amazing performance in the world. David stood in the doorway, stunned. His son had just moved across the floor under his own power. It wasn't walking, but it was more movement than Lucas had shown in over a year. That evening, Rosa repeated the floor exercise with Lily, who was eager to try after watching her brother's success. Lily was able to use her arms to pull herself forward even more effectively than Lucas, reaching her goal of a coloring book that had been placed several feet away. Both children were exhausted but exhilarated by their achievements. As Rosa helped them into their pajamas that night, they chattered excitedly about their adventures on the floor. "Tomorrow, can we try to go even farther?" Lily asked. "Of course, my little explorer," Rosa replied. "Tomorrow we will go on an even bigger adventure." David lay awake that night, replaying what he had witnessed. For the first time in 2 years, he allowed himself to feel something he had almost forgotten: hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope that came with each new expensive treatment, but a quiet, steady hope that maybe Rosa's simple faith and love might be exactly what his children needed. Catherine noticed the change in David's demeanor the next morning. "You seem different," she said as they had coffee together. "The children moved yesterday," David said quietly. "Really moved. Under their own power." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. They had been waiting so long to say those words. "Do you think—" she began, then stopped, afraid to finish the question. David took her hand. "I don't know what to think anymore, but for the first time in a long time, I think maybe we should stop being so afraid of hoping." Outside their bedroom window, they could already hear Rosa's voice singing a cheerful Spanish song, and the sound of their children laughing in response. The house that had been quiet for so long was coming alive again, one small miracle at a time. The morning that would change everything started like any other. David was in his home office, reviewing quarterly reports while listening to the familiar sounds of Rosa and the children having breakfast in the kitchen. Their laughter had become the soundtrack of his mornings, a sound he never wanted to take for granted again. He had an important video conference scheduled with investors from Tokyo, a deal that could add millions to his company's value. But as he adjusted his tie and prepared to join the call, he heard something that made him freeze. "Rosa! Rosa, look at me!" It was Lily's voice, but there was something different about it. An excitement, an urgency that made David's heart start racing. He tried to focus on his computer screen, telling himself it was probably just another small breakthrough like the floor exercises they had been practicing. But then he heard Rosa scream. It wasn't a scream of fear or pain. It was pure, overwhelming joy, the sound of someone witnessing a miracle. David abandoned his conference call and ran toward the living room. What he saw there would be burned into his memory forever. 20 feet apart, Rosa was kneeling on the floor with tears streaming down her face, her arms stretched out wide. And there, taking slow, shaky, but unmistakably deliberate steps toward her, was his daughter Lily. David's legs went weak. He gripped the doorframe to steady himself, wondering if he was dreaming. But this was real. His 4-year-old daughter, who hadn't taken a step in over 2 years, was walking. Lily's face was a picture of concentration and determination. Each step was careful and wobbly, but she was moving forward on her own 2 feet. Her arms were stretched out for balance and her tongue poked out slightly the way it did when she was working very hard on something. "That's it, my beautiful princess," Rosa called out through her tears. "You are flying. You are dancing. You are doing what I always knew you could do." Behind Lily, Lucas sat in his wheelchair, clapping his hands and cheering. "Lily's walking. Lily's walking!" he shouted with pure delight for his sister's achievement. David couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He could only watch as his daughter covered those 20 feet, one miraculous step at a time. When she finally reached Rosa and collapsed into her arms, both of them sobbing with joy, David felt something break open in his chest. All the fear, all the grief, all the carefully guarded emotions he had been holding back for 2 years came flooding out. Catherine came running from upstairs, having heard the commotion. When she saw Lily in Rosa's arms and David crying in the doorway, she understood immediately what had happened. She sank to her knees, covering her face with her hands as the reality hit her. "Did she really?" Catherine whispered. "She walked, Mama," Lucas announced proudly. Lily walked all by herself to Rosa. The video conference was completely forgotten. David's business partners could wait. Nothing in the world mattered except this moment, this miracle that had just happened in their living room. Rosa was holding Lily tight, rocking her gently and whispering in Spanish. Later, David would ask her what she had been saying, and Rosa would tell him she was thanking God and her grandmother and all the saints for answering her prayers. But Lucas wasn't content to just watch his sister's triumph. "I want to try too," he declared, struggling to get out of his wheelchair. "Lucas, wait," Catherine started to say, her protective instincts kicking in. What if he fell? What if he got hurt trying to copy his sister? But Rosa gently placed Lily on a cushion and moved toward Lucas with the same confident smile she had worn for weeks. "Of course you want to try, my strong boy. Your legs have been practicing just like Lily's. They are ready too." She helped Lucas out of his wheelchair and onto the floor mat, positioning him the same way she had positioned Lily. David held his breath, afraid to hope for 2 miracles in one day. Lucas looked at the distance between himself and Rosa, who had moved about 15 feet away. It seemed impossibly far for a little boy who had been told he might never walk. But Lucas had been watching his sister, and if Lily could do it, then so could he. He put one hand on the floor for support and slowly, carefully, pushed himself up onto his feet. For a moment he swayed, and David stepped forward, ready to catch him if he fell. But Lucas found his balance. Then, with the same determined expression his sister had worn, Lucas lifted one foot and took a step. The room was completely silent except for the sound of Rosa's gentle encouragement. "Yes, my brave boy. One step at a time. You are stronger than mountains. You are braver than lions." Lucas took another step, then another. His movements were even more unsteady than Lily's had been, but he was doing it. He was walking. David pulled out his phone, his hand shaking as he tried to record this moment. But then he stopped. Some things were too precious to view through a screen. He put the phone away and just watched his son walk across their living room. When Lucas finally reached Rosa, he threw himself into her arms with such force that they both tumbled backward onto the cushions, laughing and crying at the same time. Lily immediately crawled over to join the celebration, and soon all 3 of them were in a joyful pile on the floor. David and Catherine moved closer, kneeling down to embrace their children and the woman who had given them back their lives. For several minutes no one could speak. They just held each other and cried tears of joy and relief and gratitude. Finally, David found his voice. "Rosa," he said, his words thick with emotion. "How did you know? How did you know this was possible when all the doctors said it wasn't?" Rosa smiled through her tears, gently stroking both children's hair as they snuggled against her. "I didn't know it here," she said, pointing to her head. "I knew it here," she said, pointing to her heart. "Love always knows what is possible even when the mind cannot see it." Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been out running errands, returned to find the family on the living room floor, all of them tearful and laughing at the same time. When they explained what had happened, she was speechless. In all her years of medical training and experience, she had never seen anything like this. "We need to call the doctors," she finally said. "They need to document this. They need to understand what happened, But David wasn't thinking about doctors or documentation. He was thinking about all the specialists who had told them to accept their children's limitations, all the expensive treatments that had failed, all the hope they had been told to abandon. A simple woman from Guatemala, with no medical degree and no fancy equipment, had accomplished what millions of dollars and the world's best doctors could not. She had believed when everyone else had given up. She had loved when everyone else had focused on limitations. She had seen possibility where everyone else had seen only problems. As the afternoon went on, Lily and Lucas practiced walking again and again. They were tired quickly and their steps were still unsteady, but they were walking. Rosa stayed close, ready to catch them if they fell, cheering every small success as if it were a world record. David called his office and canceled all his meetings for the rest of the week. There would be time for business later. Right now he wanted to watch his children discover the joy of putting one foot in front of the other. That evening, as Rosa helped the exhausted but happy twins into bed, Lucas looked up at her with serious eyes. "Rosa," he said, "are you magic?" Rosa laughed softly, tucking the blanket around him. "No, my sweet boy, I am not magic, but love is magic. And when we love someone with all our heart and never stop believing in them, sometimes magic happens." David stood in the doorway, listening to these words and knowing they were the truest thing anyone had ever said in their house. 6 months later, David stood at his office window watching Central Park come alive with spring. The trees were bright green, and the walking paths were filled with families enjoying the warm weather. But today, he wasn't thinking about business deals or stock prices. Today was special. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "We're here. Come down when you're ready." David smiled and gathered his things. He had left work early because today they were doing something they had dreamed about for years, but never thought possible. They were going to the park as a family, and for the first time everyone would be walking. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, David saw them immediately. Catherine was standing near the entrance, beaming with pride. Rosa was there too, of course, because she had become family in every way that mattered. And running toward him across the marble lobby were Lily and Lucas. Papa, watch how fast I can go," Lucas called out, his little legs pumping as he ran. He was still a bit unsteady and his gait wasn't quite normal, but he was running. Actually running. Lily wasn't far behind, her curls bouncing as she moved. "I can run faster than Lucas," she announced, though she was clearly more focused on staying upright than on winning any races. David knelt down and caught both children in his arms, lifting them up and spinning them around. 6 months ago, this simple act would have been impossible. The weight of their small bodies, the feeling of their strong legs wrapped around his waist. These were gifts he would never take for granted. "Are you ready for our adventure in the park?" he asked them. "Yes," they both shouted together. Rosa said, "We're going to feed the ducks and see the playground." The walk to Central Park was only 3 blocks, but it might as well have been a journey to another planet. For the first time since the twins were babies, the family walked together as a group. No wheelchairs, no special equipment, just a normal family taking a normal walk. Other people on the street had no idea they were witnessing a miracle. To them, David and Catherine just looked like any other parents walking with their 4-year-old twins and their nanny. But David felt like he should stop every person they passed and tell them the story. His children were walking. After 2 years of being told it would never happen, they were walking. Rosa walked beside them, carrying a bag of bread for the ducks and keeping a watchful eye on both children. She had insisted on coming along, not because the twins needed her help anymore, but because, as she put it, "I want to see their first real adventure in the world." The changes in the twins went far beyond their ability to walk. They were more confident now, more curious about everything around them. Lucas stopped to examine every interesting rock and stick they passed. Lily wanted to pet every dog they encountered. They had rediscovered the fearless exploration that 4-year-olds should have. When they reached the park, the children were amazed by how different everything looked from ground level instead of from a wheelchair. The trees seemed taller, the playground equipment looked more exciting, and the duck pond appeared to stretch on forever. "Can we run to the ducks?" Lily asked, already moving in that direction. "Stay where we can see you," Catherine called after them, but she was smiling. For so long, she had been afraid to let them try anything physical. Now she was learning to let them be normal, adventurous children again. The duck pond was crowded with families, but the twins didn't seem to notice anyone else. They were completely focused on the magic of tearing bread into pieces and watching the duck swim over to eat it. Lucas tried to throw his bread farther than Lily could, while she carefully made sure each duck got a fair share. An elderly woman sitting on a nearby bench smiled at the scene. "Beautiful children," she said to Catherine. "They seem so happy and full of energy." Catherine felt tears threaten to spill over. If only this stranger knew how precious that energy was, how hard-won their happiness had been. "Thank you," she managed to say. "They are everything to us." After the ducks had eaten all the bread, the twins discovered the playground. It was a wonderland of swings, slides, and climbing equipment that they had only been able to watch from a distance before. Now they could actually play on everything. David helped Lucas onto a swing while Rosa pushed Lily on the one beside him. The sound of their laughter mixed with all the other children's voices, and David realized this was what normal sounded like. This was what he had been missing during those long, quiet months when their house felt more like a hospital than a home. "Higher! Higher!" Lucas called out, pumping his little legs to make the swing go faster. "Be careful, buddy," David said, but he was laughing too. Lucas was being wonderfully, perfectly reckless in the way that healthy 4-year-olds should be. Lily wanted to try the slide next. It was a small one, designed for young children, but climbing those steps was a major achievement. Rosa stayed close behind her, ready to help if needed, but Lily managed the climb on her own. "Look at me," she called from the top, waving at everyone before sliding down with a squeal of delight. Other parents in the playground had no idea what a big deal this was. To them it was just another child playing on a slide. But David, Catherine, and Rosa knew they were watching a miracle in action. As the afternoon went on, the twins played with other children, running and laughing and getting wonderfully dirty. They climbed on rocks, chased butterflies, and explored every corner of the playground they could reach. By the time they were ready to leave, they were exhausted but glowing with happiness. The walk home was slower than the walk there. Little legs that had been still for so long weren't quite ready for a full day of adventure yet. But neither child complained. They chattered nonstop about everything they had seen and done. "Can we come back tomorrow?" Lucas asked. "We can come back whenever you want," David promised, and he meant it. No business meeting, no conference call, no deal would ever be more important than moments like these. That evening, as Rosa helped the twins with their baths, David and Catherine sat in their living room reflecting on how much their lives had changed. The medical equipment was mostly gone now, packed away in storage. The house felt warm and alive again, filled with the sounds of children being children. "I keep thinking about all those doctors," Catherine said quietly. "All those specialists who told us to accept that our children would never walk. How were they all so wrong?" David had been wondering the same thing. "Maybe they weren't wrong about the medical facts," he said slowly. "Maybe Rosa was just right about something more important." "What do you mean?" She never treated them like they were disabled. From the very first day, she talked to them like they were normal children who just hadn't learned to walk yet. She believed in them when no one else did, including us. Catherine nodded, remembering how clinical and careful everyone else had been around the twins. While Rosa had been playful and optimistic from the start, they had offered to give Rosa a huge bonus for what she had accomplished, but she had refused it. "You already pay me fairly," she had said. "I didn't do this for money. I did it because I love them." You cannot pay someone to love your children. That is a gift they give freely. Instead, David had helped Rosa bring her own children to the United States and had set up college funds for all of them. He had also started a foundation to research how traditional healing methods could work alongside modern medicine, with Rosa as one of the advisors. But the most important change wasn't financial or professional. Rosa had become family. She had her own room in their house and a place at their dinner table every night. The twins called her Abuela Rosa, and she treated them like her own grandchildren. As David tucked Lucas into bed that night, his son looked up at him with serious eyes. "Papa, why couldn't I walk before, but I can walk now?" It was a question David had been expecting, and he had thought carefully about how to answer it. "Sometimes our bodies need time to get strong," he said, "and sometimes they need someone who believes in them to help them remember how to work. Rosa believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself." Lucas considered this. "So Rosa made me strong?" "Rosa helped you find the strength that was already inside you," David corrected gently. She just loved you enough to help you discover it. That night, as David lay in bed listening to the quiet sounds of his peaceful house, he thought about how much one person's faith and love could change everything. Rosa had given them more than just their children's ability to walk. She had given them back their hope, their joy, and their belief in miracles. Tomorrow would bring new adventures. The twins would continue growing stronger, exploring more of the world they could now access on their own feet. They would face normal childhood challenges instead of medical ones. They would run and play and sometimes fall down and get back up again, just like any other children, and through it all, Rosa would be there, believing in them, loving them, and reminding them that anything is possible when someone refuses to give up on you. David smiled in the darkness, listening to the sound of his children breathing peacefully in their rooms. Some people say miracles don't happen anymore, but David knew better. Sometimes miracles come in the form of a simple woman from Guatemala who loves without limits and believes without doubt. And sometimes that's exactly the kind of miracle a family needs.